Hello and welcome to the Lords Brewing Co YouTube channel, and if you're on Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts, welcome to the podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest, Greg Mulholland from Campaign for Pubs. Welcome.
Thank you very much, John. Absolute pleasure to be here in your absolutely wonderful brewery, great premises and absolutely beautiful tap room. So yes, I'm delighted to be here, and certainly will come back. And next time I'll make sure that I can stay a couple of hours.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. Well, I think we'll jump right in and just say, before yesterday, I don't think we'd ever spoken to each other, had we?
No. What a lovely surprise, and you can explain to the viewers, what happened and why you did it. But, I just suddenly saw on social media, the wonders of Twitter, that you had noticed an interview, or not really an interview, what turned into something of a shouting match on GB News. And a bit like me, you were quite astonished and appalled. And then you took to your excellent podcast, which shows the wonderful democracy we have with modern media and the ability for people like you to be a broadcaster as well as a brewer of great beer. And then you got that message out and showed the anger on behalf of small brewers and the wonderful community of our small independent brewers who are not very happy people with a lot of what's going on with the government and the lack of support. And similarly on the pub side, huge anger amongst publicans, and that was something that I wasn't allowed to express in that quite extraordinary, well, I won't even call it an interview, because an interview is when someone asks you questions and then you are allowed to answer, which I wasn't allowed to do. But there's real anger, and I think you could see my anger, but it was great also to see you expressing your anger and highlighting, I think, what is a real failure, and I've had lots of people saying this, a real failure of certain elements of the media from being prepared to listen to the reality of what's facing many small businesses at the moment.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So where I was at, so sales are really tough for us at the moment. I mean, gosh, I couldn't have been more unlucky having a brewery and then starting it and then a pandemic hitting, and then, we get out of the pandemic, we think everything's going all right. Then they kill all the sales in December by telling people not to go to the pubs after having their jab, which I still to this day cannot work out. And then after that, we've had actually, I need to add this in because this was kind of at the beginning. There's something called the Small Brewery Coalition, which has no small breweries in it. They decided that they were going to change the duty to make it better for them and worse for us. And it was, well, go and look at their website. It's all very, you go and tell me if there's a small brewery in that lot. And ultimately, that'll push the price up for everybody. There's lots of shenanigans, people lobbying, people in Parliament. And it's been very, very frustrating. Our local MP here has been really, really good, and Jason McCarthy trying to help hospitality, help small brewers, brought it up several times. I think one time Boris answered him. I think the only thing that would have made it more meaningful is if a bit of pork pie had fallen out of his mouth. And pubs have I feel like they've just cast the trade adrift. It's almost like it doesn't really matter. And then I was watching the news as I was doing my invoices and going through my paperwork, and I saw you pop up, and I thought, I know these guys, I'll watch this. And I was in disbelief. And I don't know whether he had a sort of moment of, I don't know, silliness, or whether it seemed like he was doing cheerleading for his political position, which I understand the media is now, it seems to follow agendas on whatever side of the political spectrum that you are. But I feel like pubs are not, I don't think they're party political. I don't think there's a side to pubs. everybody goes in a pub. I've never known a pub to go, oh, well, I'm really sorry, you can't come in because you're Conservative, or you can't come in because you're Labour, or you're a Lib Dem, or whatever. I've never known that. Everybody goes in, they have a pint, and they sit with the people that they want to. It's about community, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And I think it's very easy to say, for politicians and commentators, which let's be clear, Tom Harwood is not a journalist in any shape or form, and he exposed that to anyone who watched that. And it's not the first time that he talks over interviewers. And as you said, he's just a cheerleader for his particular brand of politics, populist politics. Now that's entirely up to him. He can have whatever views he wants, but he shouldn't be in a position. I think GB News really need to consider whether having someone who comes across so badly and simply wants to cheerlead and say everything's wonderful, and trying to defend the mini budget that even most of the Conservative MPs won't defend is just bizarre. But most of all, not to listen, to ask someone on. Incidentally, I did get an apology from the producer for Tom's extraordinary behaviour, because why ask someone to go on to hear about the views of members? And we have many small brewer members as well as publican members and pub goers. We kind of bring everyone together who's passionate about what you do here, about what the great local pubs are doing, and we represent that community, the community of, if you like, all the independents, all the on the ground stuff that people are doing day in, day out, working hard to deliver the wonderful experiences that you get in places like this, in our local pubs. Unfortunately, lots of people then represent, instead, the big money all represents the global brewers who, like Marston's Carlsberg, have just shut down the iconic Jennings Brewery up in Cumbria. Absolutely extraordinary and dreadful decision, just trashing that heritage at the same time that the same company, incidentally, has been kicking out wonderful tenants in Keswick, a town that I know very well. I'll be there in a few weeks. That sort of corporatism is disastrous, and yet that's exactly, Tom Harwood said, the pub chains, this is great for the pub chains.
I noticed
he exposed
that.
who, so he wasn't just cheerleading for his own right-wing populism. He was also cheerleading for the big corporates who have all the money.
Absolutely.
But he wouldn't even listen. He wouldn't even listen
Nope.
to why publicans are angry, to why small brewers are angry. So what a waste of time. And actually, I spoke yesterday with Talk Radio to Mike Graham,
I heard that.
who's a big character.
Yeah.
He has very, very strong views. But Mike actually takes an interest in pubs, and he actually wanted to listen. He asked sensible questions about pubs, about what's going on, about the delivery strike that will particularly hit the larger pubs, because the great thing is, your beer will still get out in your van to the pubs and the places you supply. I made that point very strongly. But, he listened. He wanted to hear. That's why I was on Talk Radio, Talk TV. But, not on GB News with Tom Harwood, who, as I say, is not a journalist. And I think GB News really need to consider whether they want someone like that on, because he's not even entertaining viewing. Whereas Mike Graham is entertaining. Love him or hate him, he's certainly a big character.
Oh,
whereas
yeah,
Tom
absolutely.
Harwood, frankly, why would anyone want to tune in and watch that little drip?
It's interesting because I rang a friend of mine last night, who's a lovely man, a guy who's got a YouTube channel called The Crummy Beard, and I said, I was like, Tom, my comment section has descended into chaos, and I don't like the negativity. Me personally, I try and rise above it and just keep pushing and pushing with. I like to put positive content out there, and I was aware that people were really bashing on Tom, and admittedly I was part of that as well. I'm very frustrated with it, but I think Tom, to me, it's not necessarily a personal thing between me and Tom. When I look at him, I've never met the man. I look at him, I feel like he represents something, and it wouldn't matter what party political area he comes from. It's cheerleading and being at such a high level that the way I perceive it, and I'm sure other viewers will feel the same, maybe you don't, but I feel like they're only ever in it for themselves. It's very self-serving, and like, pubcos, when he went to buy, I supply pubcos. I have no problem supplying them, but I also really love the independent pubs and the key pubs, and when it just sounded so out of touch from the people that are everyday kind of people that are going to work, me in the brewery, that are brewers, our delivery guys, the guys out there in the NHS, the police officer, everybody, whoever it is. I don't think it's almost like these people are in a bubble. You listen to these politicians at top level talk, and a pub is almost like a novelty thing to them, where it's the backbone of British culture. It's community. I went through a divorce, and it was tough, and I took it really badly, and I was really lonely. I moved up to Yorkshire, didn't have a lot of friends, and I used to go down the pub, and that's where it kept me sane, and it's so much more than just going for a beer.
Yeah, and didn't we really miss that with the pandemic? How lonely it was. I mean, I'm lucky, got a family, so I was at home with my family, with my kids, with my wife, but I still felt a real disconnect and a real sense of sort of loneliness from my own community, because there were lots of people that I didn't see for months, that I would probably only see in the pub or maybe in the street to say hi to. But then afterwards, when we got back to the pub, hi, how are you? Not seen, etc. Not seen you for a while. Well, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think, if anything good came out of the awful pandemic from a pub perspective, because it was terrible, and as many breweries have been hit very, very badly. Many pubs have, lots of pubs, average debt £40,000 still. People paying that off on top of everything else, and no understanding of that in Westminster, it seems, I'm afraid. Certainly not in Whitehall. We need to get that understanding across. Of course, that's why we started the campaign for pubs, to really try to get people united from publicans, from passionate pub campaigners, from pub goers, from small brewers, producers, to really get that voice to say, look, this is what we really need to preserve. Don't just listen to the big corporates and their very well-paid lobbyists.
Yeah.
Actually listen to the people who actually run pubs, who actually go to the pub, who rely on pubs and breweries for their living, and how they put food on the table for their own families. And that's one thing I kept saying all the way through the pandemic. I'm saying it now. We're saying it now, because you do get people sometimes saying, well, times are tough, so you can't possibly be asking for a tax break for lower VAT, for example, which if Tom Harwood had bothered letting me speak, I could have explained to him why that would actually help pubs directly in the way that a cut in alcohol duty overall won't. But of course he wasn't interested in his own agenda. But without these things, and without more support now for pubs and indeed small brewers, and it's been awful seeing the small brewers that have very sadly shut over the recent months. It's some great breweries, great brewing names of the last 20 odd years going to the wall. If nothing is done, if the government says, well, we can't help because there isn't enough money. Jeremy Hunt, the current Chancellor, how long he'll be there, God only knows. Yeah. But if he doesn't listen, if they don't listen, then actually what will happen is we will see many, many more pub closures, and they're currently around 50 a month, which is awful, because there were 26 a month a few years back. And there are fewer pubs now, and yet there are more closing. I came past the Wappy Spring on my way here.
Yeah, that's gone.
I was there a couple of years ago. It seemed busy. It seemed nice. Heartbreaking with that historic name. A pub that I was very fond of, just up the hill from here. I've even written a song about it. Nonceras, of course, no longer a pub. A famous wayside pub. The road is called after the pub. One of those areas. Gone. So we're going to see this more. We're losing our heritage, our history, and our heritage, and eroding our culture. And this current government, and indeed other politicians of other parties, too often don't seem to get it. They think it's a nice thing to talk about, but when it comes to it, but this winter, if there is not more support for pubs, for small brewers, and small brewers, not the huge big brewers who don't need it, then actually you will see more people out of work,
Yeah.
more people claiming benefits, more pressure on food banks, and a further crisis of, never mind cost of living, a further crisis of genuine, serious poverty in this country. So if they do not listen and say, well, pubs don't matter that much because it's about people going out, it's about beer, it's about people enjoying themselves, they are actually standing by while people's businesses and livelihoods go, and then they can't put food on the table for their own family. So we need to get that across, because this is not about saying, oh, come on, help pubs because it's about what we like. It's about the fact we have these many thousands of perfectly viable businesses, many wonderful breweries. You know.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
You know more than anyone how
Yeah.
much it costs to brew beer with the cost of energy at the moment. And we are at
It's
risk
mental.
of seeing breweries that are successful and profitable. They may not survive because of this one winter. And the other thing that Tom Harwood wouldn't listen to, he kept bleating and saying how wonderful it was that he sounded just like Liz Truss with a slightly posher voice, saying, "Oh, wonderful! She's delivered the energy measures to sort of." And of course, it's not a cap for business, first of all.
No.
But secondly, and I said this to Mike Graham, who was listening yesterday. I said that I'm speaking to publicans this week, and they're telling me that even with the cap, they are paying 300% more for their energy bills this winter compared to last winter. Now that takes a good, profitable business
Into the red, yeah.
into the red, and that's not sustainable. People are going to walk away, and yet he simply thinks, "Oh, it's wonderful! How wonderful how this government's done this," without listening to the reality of it. He's just read the sound bites, and that's pathetic. And that's not journalism. It's not even being a very good commentator, frankly, which he isn't either. So yes, that's the reality. So if the government don't bring forward some measures to target support where it's needed, to get these viable businesses through the next 6 months, through the next year, with tax breaks. We've got a government that says, oh, we're all about tax cutting. Then what do? They announce tax cuts for
the rich,
for the highest earners, and they allow bankers' bonuses to go up. Now, I'm not being political here, but surely if they wanted to seriously say we're going to cut taxes, then cut VAT.
Yeah.
To allow people, because your punters who drink your beer, that go to the local pubs, they're struggling as well.
Yeah, they are,
have less money in their pocket to spend. So VAT will help. That will help people on both sides of the bar. It will help breweries. I'd also like to see targeted support to support small brewers in this real crisis. Interesting, John, that you mentioned what we regard, the campaign for pubs, regard as a very cynical campaign by a group of medium-sized brewers. We were very critical of them at the time, to then pull the rug from under the smaller brewers and really kind of disrupt we've just seen the anniversary of small brewers relief, which has led to this wonderful boom in brewing that we've seen and we've enjoyed. I'm enjoying an award-winning pint of Sleeper Lager here, brewed in this very brewery. Very nice it is too. And that's being undermined by some slightly larger brewers, some of whom, being honest, are not brewing particularly interesting beers, and they've had it their own way for a bit too long. They also happen, I can tell you this from some of my own experience, to be rather well connected to certain MPs of certain political persuasions 100%. And have the ear of people. So I think there was a bit of a con job going on there. I think you could have had some sensible, tapered reforms that could have worked for everyone if they'd been prepared to work with others. Interestingly, from a campaigning perspective, the Campaign for Pubs were the first organisation out of the traps to criticise those changes, whilst both SEBA and CAMRA were sort of considering their position and their views. We started a letter. We got lots of small brewers sending it.
I think I signed that.
I think you did indeed. Phil Saltonstall, who you may know from the excellent Brass Castle Brewery over in Bolton, other side of Yorkshire. He's our brewery coordinator on our committee, and he sort of led that process. We were very disappointed because we will work with anyone on these issues, and then within a few days, we found that SEBA and CAMRA. We had a conversation with SEBA, with James at SEBA, because he phoned us and wanted to chat to us and have a chat
James Calder.
With James. So we had a call with him at his request. We had a Zoom call. Paul Crossman, our chair, the excellent publican from York, Phil Saltonstall, brewery coordinator, me. We chatted. We said, yeah, well, we must work together. This is what we think. We are against it. At that stage, they said, well, we're not sure. We'll have to consult with our members, which, frankly, we found pretty odd. And then they went off and they launched a petition with CAMRA and, just the two of them. We thought, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Why don't you kind of broaden this? Why don't you
yeah.
involve more people? So that was disappointing. But we were the first organisation to criticise that.
I might get myself kicked out of SEBA for this, but for me, I feel like there wasn't really a negotiation there. It was more on SEBA's side. It appeared to be, this is what we want, and that was it. And there was no moving from that position, where I feel like I understand from the larger brewers that they've lost market share from small breweries like us. I also understand that there is, when you get to a certain hectolitre, it goes through the roof, and then you've got a problem. So I'm all for it being fair.
Yeah.
But it was not really. It was very heavily biased the other way. So, and just the way this small brewers coalition was so odd looking, and I'm sure that I'm not going to say it because I don't know if it's fact, but that'd probably be the wrong thing to say. But there was a phone number that didn't work and an email that didn't get answered. And I said if I'd had more time and wasn't trying to save my own business, I was going to set up a web page called the Real Small Brewers Coalition and invite real small breweries to join. But maybe there's a space for somebody to do that. But unfortunately, for us, we can campaign on the brewery side all we like, but if the pubs aren't there to sell to, then what's the point? And that's where I've got to at the moment. There's great pubs out there. There's one particular pub I can think of, the Grove in Huddersfield. Man, that pub was rammed all the time, and it's steadily got emptier and emptier and emptier, and it's got everything going for it. Great beer, good people. Thursday night's always busy because you've got all the guys playing the folk singers and band in, and it's a great night. But a Friday night in there used to be absolutely rammed. Same on a Saturday. And I went on a Saturday, and there were people in there, but it was nothing like it used to be. I remember you had to go early because you'd never get a seat. And that's changed, and unfortunately, a lot of I think people like Tom. I know one of his relatives jumped in the chat to defend him, which is fine, but it was saying that one of his ancestors was a brewer, so Tom therefore knows a lot about brewing.
We loved your response on that, by the way.
Well, it's true though, isn't it? It's like, but I don't think a lot of the politicians understand. Every time one of those barrels, there's a big stack of barrels there that are waiting to be filled. Every one of them, the person that gets the lion's share of the money is the government, of everybody. Because we have to, the minute that beer leaves here, we have to pay duty on it. That duty is a lot of money. And if it's over 7.5%, it's double. So that goes out, so they get a bunch of money. Now, that duty isn't like payable in 3 months' time. We have to pay it on a monthly basis. So we've got to stump up the money for the duty. We have to pay that. And then on top of that, every quarter we've got the VAT. So we've already put that out. Then we've got the ingredients and the cost of energy. And then we're giving pubs 30 to 60 days to try and help them out. And we don't even know if they can pay us anyway.
Yeah.
Which is it's a scary place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the kind of lack of flexibility. I mean, the VAT thing's been a huge thing for pubs.
That's just...
with the refusal to kind of defer the VAT bills, that was a big issue last year, real problem. When people had not even started trading profitably, you've got the taxman knocking on the door saying, right, we want this. So, there is the possibility of flexibility and common sense if there's political leadership. And in terms of the duty thing, obviously there will always be arguments about duty, about what level it should be. But I think the key thing really now is that we need to have a sensible system that doesn't pull the rug from under the smallest brewers, but that doesn't put huge amounts of money, profit into the hands of the global brewers. That's very strongly our position, which is why we want to see targeted support, not just
it needs to be balanced, doesn't it?
What Tom Harwood was sort of banging on about, because in the end that will simply funnel vast amounts of money to Heineken, who are gobbling up more and more of our pubs.
Yeah.
Marston's Carlsberg, who are rapidly getting the reputation for being, one of the pub companies that treats their landlords worst at the moment, from what we're getting from our own membership, as well as shutting Jennings Brewery recently. And of course, Carlsberg, before they were merged with Marston's, destroyed the most famous beer in Yorkshire by shutting the historic Tetley's Brewery back in 2011. I mean, that's what these corporatists are about.
It's
They're
always
not about,
been that.
It's not about beer. It's
that,
about just making a profit. In the end, they don't really care how or who. And in the end, they'll sometimes drift off into other things. But they don't care how many pubs are closed, how many tenants, fail to make a living and get kicked out, and how many small breweries go to the wall and famous brewing names. There's no interest in that heritage and history and culture that we've talked about, which is why we need the support for the entrepreneurs, because the entrepreneurs are the smaller brewers. The entrepreneurs are the excellent publicans, and whether they're tenants, managers, or freeholders, the ones who then, really can make a success of their pubs. We believe very strongly that the best chance of doing that is to have the freedom to operate, which is why we have such a problem with the imposition of the unfair terms of the large pub companies and large breweries, who then, as you know, insist that, first of all, the tenant has to buy the beer at exorbitantly inflated prices, which is a very strange thing I'd be interested to know what Tom Harwood thinks about the beer tar. How can it be right for these huge corporations, who frankly operate almost like a cartel in some ways, that they actually are allowed to charge a non-market rate, a hugely inflated rate, to their own supposed business partners? In Parliament recently, the Campaign for Pubs and our partners, the Forum of British Pubs, we are in the we're in the British Pub Confederation together, which is like the coalition of organisations together. I actually said, it's akin to a protection racket, frankly, a legal protection racket. And then also what people don't realise is that those same companies, if you want to supply them, if you're a small brewer, they'll pay you peanuts.
Oh,
they will pay you
next to nothing.
I know brewers who say, well, there's no point. I can't actually make money.
No.
And of course, one of the factors in some of the recent brewery closures, small brewery closures, have been breweries, you may know this, that have become a little over-reliant on supplying to supermarkets at very low prices and to pubcos at very low prices.
Yeah.
And that needs to change. That's wrong. I think if people realise, you remember that, I can't remember, was it 20 years ago maybe, there was a big campaign to stop the big supermarkets exploiting dairy farmers.
Yeah,
because they were not getting paid a fair price. They were basically dairy farming at a loss, but the power of the supermarkets meant that the farmers really couldn't compete with that. It was an awful time for dairy farmers. A campaign started, and in the end then, the supermarkets had to move. We need a similar campaign actually amongst the brewers. And if SEBA aren't up for this, if it's something that is a bit too radical for them, sometimes, let's face it, they have to sort of sit on both sides of the fence.
Well, they have to,
and we understand that.
Yeah.
But we need a strong campaigning voice from brewers, and the Campaign for Pubs would love to be part of it, to say, stop, forcing brewers to sell at such a ridiculous price. And that actually includes the big pub codes, the likes of Heineken and Marston's and Punch Taverns and Stonegate, Green Pig, etc.
I will say that,
but it also includes Wetherspoons. Wetherspoons, in our view, do not pay a fair price for their beer. So if they want to sell to consumers for a very cheap price, that's a business model. That's fine. That's how they operate. But don't do it on the back of forcing small brewers to sell at too low a price just because you have the power. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it's really time to start exposing the way that in the market as it is skewed towards the large corporates. Actually, what we now need to see is a fight back, and to say, you can't do this. Give small brewers a fair price for this wonderful product. This is craft product. This is
handmade.
It's wonderful, and yet you're being asked to sell it for peanuts, for less than your mass-produced.
Cheapo lager.
Cheap lager, smooth flow, etc. Deliberately they make it very hard for you to compete, and then they still want you to pay.
Oh,
to give a
yeah,
really low
they want
price.
us to increase all of our duty and everything, but they don't want us to charge them properly. But then we deal with Stonegate a lot via a company called the Beer Company, and actually, I will say, in their defence, we get a very good price with those guys. It's fair, but also I've joined Seba Beer Flex recently, and obviously, I think there's an element of... So Beer Flex is a system where certain pubcos can order their beer through Seba, and they get some good and interesting beers. But I don't know who make... I don't know really how much Seba make out of it. I don't think it's a great deal. The lion's share, obviously, I would hope, goes to the pub, but I think it's more to the group that might own it. But Green King just joined on there, and I looked at the prices. I said, you've got no minimum order, so they can order 1 barrel, and then they want you to drive all the way with that handmade beer all the way to somewhere like Hull or Liverpool, and they want you to charge 50 quid or 52 or 54, and it's like I physically cannot make that work. Now, I think people don't realise the margin within a cask of beer is probably only between £10 and £30, depending on what it is. But it's also a time thing. So the lager that you're drinking, that takes 8 weeks to make that, because it has to be conditioned properly. We have a Pilsner, which we haven't made all year, because it takes 3 months to make. So that'll go on over Christmas. And then, there's 7 tanks in here. Some of those beers are dry hopped, so they take twice as long in the tank, which means I can't make something else. And one of the things that people got annoyed with us, but why can't I have the dry hop one? And I'm like, well, I can give it to you, but I need to charge you more for it because it's been in the tank a lot longer, and it's actually cost us a lot more to make.
Yeah.
And we've added a second line of hops, and they just don't seem to understand what it's like, because the mass-produced guys, they can just produce thousands of litres in one sitting.
Absolutely.
And then you've got the scale of economy and all that kind of stuff. Sat here is probably, I don't know, probably £70,000 worth of kit, at least.
Yeah.
And obviously we've got to get our money back for that. We've got the fuel cost. We've got very good fuel-efficient vans, but the fuel is double. We're paying double on fuel. This is something that really gets me, and I'm sick of hearing it. And when Tom said it, it really wound me up, was the fact that, there's a energy price cap and there's this. Well,
even though it's not a cap.
It's not a cap, and also, it's too late. A lot of companies have already gone. Yeah. A friend of mine's had a bar in town called Zephyr. It's been there for years and years and years. And Kirklees has done a fantastic job of making the town centre more and more rubbish as time has gone on. I know they're trying to sort it out now, but the proof will be in the pudding. And he got his energy bill. So he was already paying around £1,000 a month. It was something like £56,000 for his renewal. So just went, forget it.
Yeah,
I'm done.
Absolutely.
So it's too late.
It is, and it's not enough. We of course found out, and it might be a slightly cruel time to kick the current Prime Minister while she's very much down, but she didn't even understand the policy for homeowners, for residential. She thought it was a cap that you couldn't pay more than £2,500, and it's not. And that's had to be explained, including, it seems, to her. But of course, now that they've gone back, that was supposed to be 2 years. That's only 6 months for houses, which worries consumers, which worries pub goers, which worries beer drinkers. But for businesses, despite that extraordinary cheerleading from Tom, and it wasn't really part of the mini budget anyway. The energy announcements were separate. The mini budget was all about the what, frankly, I think most people saw as rather extraordinary ideological decisions based on borrowing, So, yeah, I'm afraid it's too little, too late, and not long enough. It's only for 6 months, and still, and I'm going to say this again, and I don't know if any of Tom's relatives and ancestors and everyone else will be interested. Pubs and brewers are still paying several times more. I mean, 100%, 200%, 300%. The figures that you gave are, sadly not uncommon. They are unpayable. And also, it isn't really helping with those who simply can't now find a supplier. There are publicans, and indeed I'm sure it's the case in the small brewery community potentially, but certainly amongst publicans, some can't even find a supplier.
Yeah.
And therefore they're having to pay at the highest rate on a sort of a non-contract rate. Absolutely unsustainable. People have no choice but to walk away. So for any smug commentator to not listen to that, to think it's all fine because some political hero of theirs has made some, pretty weak announcement. Yes, it's an awful lot better than nothing. It's not.
I think we'd agree that. Yeah.
No. But it's not enough, and on its own, it is not enough. And messing around with duty and giving millions at one stroke to Heineken and Marston's Carlsberg, Tom, doesn't help pubs and publicans. Go and actually speak to a publican instead of just ranting on your little chat show, listening to the sound of your own voice, because it isn't enough. We need help to directly support pubs. We need a business rates holiday that needs to go on.
Yeah.
We also need reform of that ridiculous system that just about every party has said that they realise it doesn't work, and we need a reform of the business rate system. And then they get into power and they do absolutely nothing about it. They sit on their hands.
So whoever it is, they never do anything, do they?
We need a reform of the business rate system, but we need direct support, and we need flexibility about things like tax bills that are outstanding. But we also need more decisive action in the energy sector. I'm not really sure now. I mean, it's impossible to keep up with what's actually being announced by the government and hasn't been U-turned. But I think we have got something that is akin to a windfall tax on those profits, because I think one thing that's really interesting, John. I go to pubs all the time. I live in Otley, which is a fabulous town, wonderful pubs. I keep in touch with the whole community, with publicans. As well as friends and just people I see in the pub, but I also go to pubs in other areas. Wherever I am, I'll find find a pub. I was in Kendal for a night a couple of weeks ago. I had a very pleasant evening in Bingley. Just kind of all over the place. I'll be down in Wales. I'll be down in the Midlands this weekend. Then I'm down in Wales. So I'll be going to pubs everywhere, and I get a really good sense. And publicans are not particularly political people. They've got strong views, but they're not. They're generally not sort of aligned. They're not.
Right. Yeah.
They're not sort of. I very strongly this colour or this party. But I can tell you what. There's real anger. There's real dismay, and there's a real sense that both ministers and civil servants down in Whitehall do not understand.
No.
Don't care. Don't get out. Don't go to the pub. Happy to have their picture. Happy to have their picture in a local brewery,
opportunity,
or in the local pub.
Yeah.
But actually, when it comes to actually understanding the reality, and then what do they get? They get the so-called British Beer and Pub Association, which as everyone in the sector really knows, is the big brewers and pubcos alliance, because that's who they are. That's who they represent. They will spin a line through their very expensive, very highly paid lobbyists, with lots of glossy campaigns and very very misleading campaigns. They will say, it's all about beer duty. It's all about, if you want to say pubs, it's all about beer duty.
It's not.
Forgetting to say
that's
that
a little tiny bit of it.
Forgetting to say that will actually just funnel millions to the very companies who need it least, and in some cases, unfortunately, the very companies who still exploit their own tenants and make it very hard for their tenants to make a living. So we need real change. This is where I'm going to do a little plug.
No,
so
you go for it.
If you believe in this sort of vision, if you believe in wonderful breweries like Lord's Brewing here in Golcar, just outside Huddersfield, if you believe in your local pubs, if you want to support publicans, then first thing is go to the pub.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who owns it, because pub tenants need your support. If the building is owned by a pub company, the tenant absolutely needs your support. So go and support your local pubs, support your smaller brewers. Do sort of encourage your local pubs, if they're able to get local beers on, because it also makes it more attractive to go.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that everyone has challenges with the cost of living. So it's in the context of everyone's budget, but where you can, if you're able to, get out and support pubs as much as you can during this very difficult winter. But also, we would say, if you believe in our vision, if you believe in what we've talked about and these wonderful independent small breweries, and these, the importance of our pub culture, as well as a fairer deal for our publicans and our small brewers, then join the campaign for pubs, because we are trying to be this voice, a voice that is needed in the sector. You've got CAMRA, which is an organisation that's been around for years. They've done some wonderful work. I've been a CAMRA member for many years.
Yeah,
they represent beer drinkers. They represent consumers. And have done some wonderful work and continue to. Wonderful CAMRA branches. I've got many friends in CAMRA branches. But the campaign for pubs is a campaign that brings together publicans as well as pub goers, as well as pub campaigners, as well as small brewers. And therefore, we have a slightly different agenda. We don't think that there should be any imposition, for example, of discounts. We wouldn't have any sort of relationship apart from it highlighting the models of some of these large companies. So we have that independence. And if you believe in the vision, go onto our website, read our mission statement, and if that's what you believe in, if you believe in proper pubs, then as well as being a member of other organisations, because clearly brewers will be members of SEBA, for example, and if someone who loves real ale will be a member of CAMRA, that's great. But join the campaign for pubs as well. It's only £25, and join this voice. We can be a little bit stronger and a little bit clearer on certain things like the beer tie, certain things like planning reform, which needs radical overhaul to save pubs.
They do,
We have that ability. So if that's what you believe in, if you're passionate about it, then join us. Let's do everything we can. Let's get pubs and small brewers through this very difficult winter.
Yeah.
And then let's ensure that this vitally important part of our heritage, our history, our beer, our national drink,
Yeah.
and our pubs, the most wonderful, most unique, world famous place to drink them.
It's true.
We need to do all we can to preserve that, because it's part of who we are as a nation, and it's so important to our local communities and combating loneliness, as well as feeling a part of your community. So please join us if you believe in that vision. Go onto the website. But thank you very much for having me.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, and I second that. Get down to their website, campaign for pubs. Is it .co.uk?
It's .org. campaignforpubs.org.uk.
Yeah, go and sign up and be part of it. And it's important, because if no one shouts out anything, we're going to lose the pubs, and you'll lose the breweries that you love. And the breweries that are left will get bought by the big ones, and then their beer will not be the same anymore. Okay. And that's the unfortunate truth of the matter.
And in the end, they'll close it down like the iconic Jennings Brewery in Cockermouth.
Yeah, it'll end up going back to how it was in the 70s and early 80s, where it was like 4 types of beer, and that's all you could get.
Support our real entrepreneurs. And here's the Lord's Brewing.
Here's the Lord's Brewing. Cheers.
Cheers.